Welcome to the True Crime Studio. Today's story is one of heartbreak, redemption, and the strength of second chances. A wealthy man thought he had it all until one fateful dinner revealed a secret that would forever change his life. Stay with us to uncover how love and forgiveness can rewrite even the most shattered relationships. If you enjoy heartfelt stories like this, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Let's dive in.
James Carter, a wealthy and charismatic CEO, is dining with his new fiancée, Claire, in one of the city's most luxurious restaurants. They're celebrating a multi-million-dollar deal and their upcoming wedding. The ambiance is perfect: soft piano music, glittering chandeliers, and glasses of expensive wine. As Claire recounts plans for their honeymoon in Paris, James notices a familiar figure working behind the counter: Samantha, his ex-wife. She's wearing a faded uniform, her face tired yet dignified, and her apron barely conceals her pregnant belly. James's world tilts. The confident businessman is suddenly overwhelmed by emotions he hasn't felt in years: shock, guilt, and something deeper he can't quite name. As their eyes meet, Samantha looks away, pretending not to notice him. Claire catches James's distraction and questions him, but he brushes it off, saying it's nothing. The rest of the dinner is tense, with James unable to focus. Who was the father of her child? Why was she working such a demanding job? Questions swirl in his mind, and he realizes he can't leave the restaurant without confronting her. The atmosphere in the grand restaurant remained lively, but for James Carter, the world had shrunk to a single figure behind the counter: Samantha, his ex-wife, pregnant and working in a position that seemed a world away from the ambitious and vibrant woman he once knew. The sight gnawed at him, each second that passed amplifying the discomfort coursing through his veins. Samantha's face, though shadowed by fatigue, held an undeniable strength. Her movements were deliberate yet quick as she balanced trays and addressed patrons with polite smiles. When their eyes had locked for that fleeting moment, James had seen the flicker of recognition, and something else: pain, resentment. She'd looked away too quickly for him to decipher. At their table, Claire's voice continued, recounting ideas for a lavish Paris honeymoon, but her words faded into the background. James nodded absently, his eyes involuntarily darting back toward Samantha. "James!" Claire's sharp tone brought him back. "Are you even listening?" "Of course," he lied, forcing a smile. But Claire wasn't convinced. Her blue eyes narrowed as she followed his gaze. "What's so interesting over there?" she asked, a trace of irritation in her voice. Before James could respond, her eyes landed on Samantha, and understanding dawned. "Who is she?" Claire asked, her tone deceptively light yet laced with curiosity. "No one," James replied too quickly, his voice stiff. He cleared his throat, trying to regain composure. "Just someone who looks familiar." Claire raised an elegant brow but didn't press further. Still, the tension at the table was palpable. The easygoing charm that usually defined James's demeanor had evaporated, replaced by something unsettled and distracted. As the evening wore on, Claire's conversation grew quieter. She twirled the stem of her wine glass, clearly sensing that James was no longer present in the moment. For his part, James couldn't focus. His thoughts raced in circles, full of unanswered questions. How long had Samantha been working here? Why hadn't she reached out if she was struggling? And the most haunting question of all, was the child his? James excused himself abruptly, unable to stay seated any longer. "I'll be back in a moment," he muttered, ignoring Claire's raised eyebrow. As he approached the counter, his steps felt heavier with each stride. Samantha was speaking to another waitress when she noticed him heading her way. Her body tensed, and she quickly turned back to her work, hoping to avoid him. But James was determined. "Samantha," he said softly but firmly. She froze for a moment, her shoulders stiffening before she turned to face him. Her expression was a mix of exhaustion and irritation, and her tone was clipped when she replied, "I'm working, James. I don't have time for this." Her words stung more than he expected, but James pressed on, lowering his voice to avoid drawing attention. I didn't expect to see you here." "Well, life doesn't always turn out the way we expect, does it?" Samantha replied coldly. Her eyes darted toward the tables, her professional demeanor slipping as she tried to keep her emotions in check. "You shouldn't be here." "I'm not here to cause trouble," James said quickly. But I have questions, Samantha. Is the baby? She cut him off sharply. Don't you dare, James. Her voice was firm, though not loud enough to attract the attention of diners. You don't get to waltz back into my life and ask questions you don't deserve the answers to. James flinched at the venom in her words. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, but deep down he knew she was right. When they had divorced, he had buried himself in work, shutting out any remnants of their life together. He had ignored the pain she must have felt, the struggles she had endured, and now, seeing her like this, he realized just how much he had failed her. Samantha, please, he said, his tone softening. I didn't know things had gotten this bad. I just want to help. She laughed bitterly. Help? Now you want to help? Where was this concern when I needed you the most, James? When I had nothing and no one? James felt the weight of her words like a blow to the chest. He opened his mouth to respond, but found himself at a loss. What could he say that wouldn't sound hollow? Before he could try again, a customer called for Samantha, cutting their conversation short. She took the opportunity to walk away, leaving James standing there, his questions unanswered and his heart heavy. Returning to the table, James found Claire watching him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Care to explain what that was about? She asked, her tone deceptively light. James sighed, rubbing his temples. She's someone I used to know. Someone you used to know, Claire repeated, her eyebrows arching. James, it's obvious there's more to this. Who is she? He hesitated, knowing that the truth would lead to more questions than he was ready to answer. She's my ex-wife, he admitted finally. Claire's eyes widened in surprise. Your ex-wife? And she's pregnant? James, is it? I don't know, he interrupted quickly. I don't know anything right now. The rest of the dinner was a strained affair. Claire tried to maintain polite conversation, but the tension between them was undeniable. James barely touched his food, his mind consumed by thoughts of Samantha. As they left the restaurant, James couldn't help but glance back one last time. Samantha was busy clearing a table, her movements methodical and efficient despite the visible exhaustion in her posture. She didn't look up. Outside, the crisp night air did little to clear James's mind. As he helped Claire into the car, he knew he couldn't let this go. He needed answers, not just for himself, but for Samantha and the child she carried. The car ride home was silent save for the soft hum of the engine. Claire seemed deep in thought, her lips pressed into a thin line. James's grip tightened on the steering wheel as he replayed the evening in his mind. James, Claire said finally, breaking the silence. Whatever this is, you need to figure it out, but I'm not going to sit around while you sort through your past. Her words hung heavy in the air, and James nodded, though he didn't respond. He knew she was right. He couldn't ignore this any longer. Samantha's reappearance in his life was more than just a coincidence. It was a reckoning. As they pulled into the driveway of his sprawling estate, James felt the weight of the evening settle over him like a suffocating blanket. Inside the house, the opulence that once brought him comfort now felt hollow. He poured himself a glass of scotch and stared out the window at the city lights, his mind racing. Who was the father of Samantha's child? What had happened to her after their divorce? And most pressing of all, could he ever make amends for the pain he had caused? The answers wouldn't come easily, but James knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. James turns to his trusted confidant, Liam, for help in uncovering Samantha's circumstances. But as he delves deeper into her life, he uncovers more than he bargained for, forcing him to confront the man he has become. The weight of the evening lingered as James Carter sat alone in his opulent study, nursing a glass of scotch. The room, adorned with modern art and leather-bound books, usually brought him comfort, a testament to his success and the empire he had built. Tonight, however, it felt suffocating. The memory of Samantha, pregnant and working as a waitress, haunted him. Her cold, fiery words played on a loop in his mind. He needed answers, and he needed them now. Reaching for his phone, James scrolled through his contacts and stopped at a familiar name, Liam Calloway. Liam was not only James's best friend but also his personal lawyer and confidant. He had been with James through the highs and lows, offering advice and often acting as a voice of reason. If anyone could help him navigate this complicated situation, it was Liam. The phone rang twice before Liam's deep, jovial voice came through. James, it's late. What's going on? You don't usually call after hours unless it's something serious, or you've had one too many drinks. It's serious, James said, his tone devoid of humor. "I need to talk to you. Can you come over?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Liam recognized the urgency in James's voice. "I'll be there in 20. True to his word, Liam arrived shortly after. He walked into the study with his usual confident stride, dressed casually in a sweater and jeans. His sharp eyes immediately picked up on James's unease. "This better not be about work," Liam said, taking a seat across from James. "You've been looking unusually stressed lately." "It's not work," James admitted, setting his glass down. "It's personal." Liam raised an eyebrow. "Personal? That's new for you. All right, spill." James leaned forward, running a hand through his hair. "I saw Samantha tonight." The surprise on Liam's face was evident. "Your ex-wife? Where?" "At L'Etoile. She was working there," James said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "As a waitress, and she's pregnant." Liam blinked, clearly taken aback. "Wait, Samantha? Working as a waitress? Pregnant? And you didn't know about this?" James shook his head. "I had no idea. We haven't spoken since the divorce. She cut off all contact." Liam leaned back, processing the information. "So, what did you do?" "I tried to talk to her," James admitted. "But she shut me down. She doesn't want anything to do with me, Liam. She's angry. Rightfully so. And now I'm left with more questions than answers." Liam studied his friend for a moment before speaking. "Let me guess. You want me to look into her situation?" James nodded. "I need to know what's going on in her life. Is she struggling? Does she have someone else? And most importantly, is the baby mine?" Liam sighed. "James, you realize you're opening a Pandora's box here. If you go down this road, you're going to have to confront a lot of things. Your past, your mistakes, and probably some uncomfortable truths." "I know," James said firmly. "But I can't just ignore this, Liam. If the baby is mine, I need to know. And if she's struggling because of me, I need to make it right." Liam nodded slowly. "All right, I'll see what I can find out. But I'm warning you, don't expect this to be easy." Over the next few days, Liam began digging into Samantha's circumstances. He started with public records and financial statements, piecing together a picture of her life since the divorce. What he uncovered was sobering. Samantha had been living in a modest apartment in a less affluent part of the city. She worked 2 jobs, one as a waitress at L'Etoile and another as a part-time clerk at a small bookstore. There was no indication of a new relationship or financial support from anyone else. "She's been doing this all on her own," Liam told James during one of their meetings. "No partner, no help, just her." James felt a pang of guilt as he listened. Samantha had always been independent, but the thought of her working so hard while carrying a child, possibly his child, was unbearable. "Do you know how far along she is?" James asked. Liam shook his head. "No, but if I had to guess, she's probably around 7 or 8 months. She's in the home stretch." James's stomach churned at the realization. If Samantha was that far along, she had been pregnant for most of the time they had been apart, and he hadn't even known. "What about her finances?" James pressed. "Is she struggling?" "She's not destitute, but it's clear she's scraping by," Liam replied. "Her jobs barely cover her rent and basic expenses. She's probably putting most of her money toward preparing for the baby." James leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The more he learned, the more he realized how much he had failed Samantha. He had always prided himself on being a problem solver, someone who could fix anything. But this was different. This wasn't a business deal he could negotiate, or a problem he could throw money at. "This isn't just about money, is it?" Liam said, breaking the silence. James looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "You're not just feeling guilty because she's struggling," Liam said. "You're realizing that you walked away from something, someone, that mattered, and now you're wondering if it's too late to make things right." James didn't respond immediately. He stared out the window, the city lights twinkling in the distance. Finally, he nodded. "I can't change the past, Liam, but maybe I can make amends." James knew that confronting Samantha again wouldn't be easy, but he was determined. He couldn't let things stay as they were. He needed to talk to her, not as a businessman trying to solve a problem, but as a man trying to take responsibility for his actions. He decided to approach her outside of work, where she wouldn't feel cornered or exposed. Liam helped him track her schedule, and one evening James waited near the bookstore where she worked. He watched as she locked up, her movements slow and careful. She looked exhausted. her hands instinctively resting on her belly as she walked. "Samantha," James called out softly as he approached her. She turned, her expression wary. "What are you doing here, James?" "I just want to talk," he said. "Please. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." She hesitated, clearly torn. Finally, she sighed. "Fine. 5 minutes." They walked to a nearby bench and sat down. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The tension between them was palpable. "I know I have no right to ask this," James began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "But is the baby mine?" Samantha's eyes flashed with anger. "You really think you deserve an answer to that?" "I don't," James admitted, "but I need to know." She looked away, her jaw tight. "Yes, James, the baby is yours, but don't think for a second that means you have a right to be involved." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. He had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed was overwhelming. "Samantha, I know I've made mistakes," he said, his voice cracking. "I've hurt you and I'll never forgive myself for that. But I want to be there for you, for the baby. Please let me help." She turned to him, her eyes filled with tears. "Help? You want to help now? Where were you when I needed you, James? When I was alone and scared and trying to figure out how to survive? I was a coward," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I ran from my responsibilities because it was easier than facing the truth. But I'm here now, Samantha, and I'm not going anywhere." Samantha stared at him for a long moment, her emotions warring on her face. Finally, she stood up. "I don't trust you, James. Not yet. But if you're serious about this, you're going to have to prove it." James nodded, determination hardening his resolve. "I will." As she walked away, James felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And for the first time in years, he felt like he was on the path to becoming the man he should have been all along. James begins taking concrete steps to support Samantha and prepare for fatherhood. However, his actions are met with skepticism, forcing him to confront the long road to redemption. James Carter returned to his mansion that evening, his mind reeling. Samantha's confirmation that the baby was his had shaken him to the core. The weight of his failures pressed heavily on him, yet there was also a glimmer of hope. She had given him an opening, a slim chance to prove himself. But James knew this wasn't just about showing up with gestures of help. It was about rebuilding trust, brick by brick. As he entered the expansive foyer of his home, the opulence that once comforted him now felt hollow. He strode into his study, poured himself a glass of water instead of his usual scotch, and sat down with a notebook. This wasn't a problem he could solve through his usual methods of negotiation or delegation. It demanded something he hadn't exercised in a long time: humility and consistent effort. The first thing James decided was to respect Samantha's boundaries. He wouldn't bombard her with calls or show up unannounced at her work. Instead, he would focus on what he could do behind the scenes to ease her burden. He reached out to Liam the next morning. "I want to set up a fund for her," James said, his tone resolute. "Something she can access for anything she needs, for her and the baby." Liam raised an eyebrow. "Do you think she'll accept it?" "She might not," James admitted, "but I'll make it anonymous. If she doesn't want to use it, at least it'll be there." Liam nodded, appreciating the thoughtfulness behind the gesture. Within days, they established a fund in Samantha's name, with no direct link to James. He also arranged for a small care package to be delivered to her apartment, a simple bundle of groceries, baby supplies, and a note that read, "I know I don't deserve your trust, but I want to help in any way I can. No strings attached. Take care of yourself and the baby. James." When Samantha found the package on her doorstep, she stared at it for a long time. The practical part of her, stretched thin by exhaustion and financial strain, appreciated the gesture, but her heart was wary. Could she trust that James's intentions were genuine? Was he trying to buy forgiveness? Still, she took the items inside, telling herself it was for the baby's sake, not his. While James took steps to support Samantha, he also realized that true redemption would require confronting the man he had become. He scheduled his first therapy session, an unfamiliar and daunting step for someone used to burying his emotions beneath layers of work and ambition. The therapist, Dr. Evelyn Grant, was a calm and steady presence. In their first session, James found himself unexpectedly candid. "I've spent my life chasing success," he admitted, "and I've hurt people along the way. My ex-wife, Samantha, I destroyed our marriage with my selfishness, and now she's pregnant with my child, and I'm terrified I'll fail her again." Dr. Grant leaned forward, her expression compassionate. "Acknowledging your mistakes is a crucial first step, but change doesn't come from guilt alone. It comes from understanding why you acted the way you did, and making intentional choices to act differently moving forward." Over the weeks that followed, James delved into painful memories. He revisited the moments when he had dismissed Samantha's needs, prioritized his career over their relationship, and sought validation in all the wrong places. It was a humbling experience, but it also brought clarity. If he wanted to rebuild his relationship with Samantha and be a father to their child, he had to earn it. Not with grand gestures, but with consistent, genuine effort. James's next step was to communicate with Samantha in a way that didn't feel intrusive. He sent her occasional text messages, always brief and respectful. "How are you feeling? Let me know if there's anything you need." At first, Samantha didn't respond. She wasn't sure how to interpret his sudden interest in her well-being, but after a particularly grueling day at work, she finally replied, "I'm fine, don't worry about me." It wasn't much, but for James it was a breakthrough. Encouraged, he continued sending messages every few days, updates about the fund, offers of help, and occasional words of encouragement. Meanwhile, he began preparing for fatherhood in earnest. He devoured books on parenting, attended a workshop on infant care, and even started assembling a crib in one of his guest rooms. It was a strange sight. James Carter, the meticulous CEO, fumbling with screws and instructions, but it felt right. For the first time in years, he was doing something that didn't revolve around his career. As Samantha's due date approached, her workload became increasingly difficult to manage. The long hours on her feet left her exhausted, and the constant worry about finances weighed heavily on her. Amanda, her colleague and closest confidant, noticed the strain. "You need to take it easy, Samantha," Amanda said one evening as they closed up the restaurant. "You're doing too much." "I don't have a choice," Samantha replied, rubbing her swollen belly. "I can't afford to stop working." Amanda hesitated before speaking. "What about James? Hasn't he been trying to help?" Samantha frowned. "He's been sending me things, groceries, baby supplies, but I don't know if I can trust him, Amanda. What if he's just doing this out of guilt?" "Maybe he is," Amanda said gently. "But guilt doesn't always mean insincerity. Maybe he really does want to make things right." Samantha didn't respond, but Amanda's words lingered in her mind. That night, as she unpacked another package from James, a box of prenatal vitamins and a soft blanket for the baby, she found herself wondering if he had changed. Could the man who had once hurt her so deeply truly be capable of redemption? One day, Samantha received a text from James. "I'd like to be there for the next ultrasound if you'll allow it, but I understand if you'd rather I didn't." She stared at the message for a long time. Part of her wanted to refuse, to keep him at arm's length, but another part of her, the part that remembered the man she had once loved, felt a pang of longing. Maybe he deserved a chance to show he was serious. "Fine," she replied. "The appointment is next Tuesday at 3 p.m. When James arrived at the clinic that day, he was uncharacteristically nervous. He spotted Samantha in the waiting room, her hands resting protectively over her belly. She glanced up as he approached, her expression guarded. "Thank you for letting me come," James said, his voice soft. She nodded but said nothing. During the appointment, as the ultrasound technician guided the probe over Samantha's belly, the room filled with the sound of a tiny, rapid heartbeat. James's breath caught in his throat. On the screen, he saw the faint outline of his child, a moment that hit him with a force he hadn't expected. "That's your baby," the technician said with a smile. "A healthy little boy." James felt tears prick his eyes. He looked at Samantha, who was staring at the screen with a mixture of wonder and vulnerability. In that moment, he realized how much he wanted to be there, not just for the child but for her. After the appointment, they walked out together, the air between them lighter but still tinged with tension. "Thank you for letting me be a part of that," James said. Samantha glanced at him, her expression softening. "It was nice to have you there." It wasn't an invitation for more, but it was a start. And for James, that was enough. As they parted ways, James felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but he was ready to face it. For Samantha, for their child, and for the man he wanted to become. James takes on a more active role in Samantha's life, but his efforts are met with skepticism from those around her. Meanwhile, the arrival of the baby brings unexpected challenges and an opportunity for James to prove his commitment once and for all. James Carter walked away from the ultrasound appointment feeling both elated and burdened. Hearing his son's heartbeat and seeing Samantha's guarded but vulnerable expression gave him a renewed sense of purpose. But he also understood something clearly. Words alone wouldn't win back her trust. He needed to show her through his actions that he was serious about being there for both her and their child. James decided his next step was to ensure that Samantha and the baby had everything they needed for a safe and comfortable life. He knew she wouldn't accept direct handouts, so he reached out to Amanda, who had become Samantha's closest confidant. He arranged a meeting with her at a coffee shop. Amanda eyed him warily as she sat across from him. "I wasn't expecting you to reach out." "I know," James admitted, his tone sincere. "But I need your help. Samantha won't let me do anything for her directly, and I want to respect her boundaries. That said, she's about to have a baby and I can't stand the thought of her struggling." Amanda studied him for a moment as if trying to gauge his intentions. "So, what do you want from me?" "Just information," James said. "What does she need most right now? And how can I help without making her feel like I'm overstepping?" Amanda hesitated before answering. "She needs a better place to live. Her apartment is small, and it's not in the best area, but she's too proud to ask for help or move somewhere more expensive. She also hasn't bought a lot of baby supplies yet. She's been stretching every dollar." James nodded, mentally taking note of everything. "Thank you. I'll handle it." James decided to start with the apartment. He found a modest but beautiful 2-bedroom unit in a safe neighborhood, not far from Samantha's work. It was fully furnished, with a nursery already set up. To avoid overwhelming her, he worked with Amanda to present the idea in a way that Samantha might accept. A week later, Amanda casually brought up the topic during one of their shifts. "You know, I heard about this great apartment that's opening up in a nicer area," Amanda said as they cleaned tables. "It's close to work and super affordable. I think you should check it out." Samantha raised an eyebrow. "Amanda, I can barely afford where I'm living now. How am I supposed to afford a nicer place?" Amanda shrugged, trying to sound nonchalant. "The landlord is apparently super understanding. They're willing to offer a discount for single moms. It wouldn't hurt to at least look." Reluctantly, Samantha agreed to visit the apartment. When she stepped inside, she was taken aback. The space was warm and inviting, with sunlight streaming through large windows. The nursery was simple but beautiful, painted in soft blues with a crib and a rocking chair. "It's perfect," Samantha whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. But then doubt crept in. "Amanda, this is too good to be true. Who's behind this?" Amanda hesitated, knowing she couldn't lie. "James found it, but he's not asking for anything in return. He just wanted to help." Samantha's initial reaction was anger. "I knew it. He's trying to buy his way back into my life." Amanda placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "He's not asking for anything, Samantha. He just wants to make sure you and the baby are safe. Maybe this is his way of showing he's serious." Samantha stood in the middle of the apartment, torn. Finally, she sighed. "Fine, but I'm not thanking him. Not yet." James didn't stop with the apartment. Over the next few weeks, he continued making quiet contributions to ensure Samantha had everything she needed. Through Amanda, he provided gift cards for grocery stores, arranged for a cleaning service to help Samantha prepare for the baby, and even paid for prenatal yoga classes. Samantha's feelings were complicated. On one hand, she appreciated the support. It made her life easier during an incredibly challenging time. On the other hand, she resented that James was suddenly stepping in after years of absence. "Why now?" she asked Amanda one evening. "Why couldn't he have been this thoughtful when we were married?" Amanda shrugged. "People change, Samantha. Maybe he's finally realizing what he lost." "I don't know if I can trust that," Samantha said, her voice filled with uncertainty. James's efforts didn't go unnoticed by those around Samantha. Her co-workers, neighbors, and even her landlord began to comment on the sudden improvements in her life. Some were supportive, but others were skeptical. "Don't let him manipulate you," one co-worker warned. "Men like him only care about their image." Samantha couldn't help but wonder if they were right. Was James doing all of this because he truly cared, or was he trying to alleviate his guilt? The doubts gnawed at her, making it hard to fully accept his help. One day, Amanda surprised Samantha with a small baby shower at the restaurant after closing time. The staff had pooled their resources to buy decorations, a cake, and a few gifts. It was a touching gesture that brought Samantha to tears. As she unwrapped a gift, a beautiful handmade blanket, Amanda handed her an envelope. "This one's from James," Amanda said softly. Samantha opened it hesitantly. Inside was a handwritten note and a voucher for a year's worth of diapers and baby formula. The note read, "Samantha, I know I can't undo the past, but I want to do everything I can to support you and our son moving forward. This is just a small way of showing that I'm committed to being there for you both. James." Samantha folded the note and set it aside, her emotions swirling. She didn't know what to feel, gratitude, anger, or something in between. Despite her reservations, Samantha agreed to let James accompany her to another doctor's appointment. This time, the focus was on preparing for the delivery. As they sat together in the waiting room, James noticed how tired she looked. "You've been doing so much on your own," he said gently. "I don't know how you've managed." Samantha glanced at him, her expression guarded. "I didn't have a choice." James nodded, his voice filled with regret. "I should have been there. I can't change the past, but I want to be there now. For you, and for our son." For the first time, Samantha saw genuine vulnerability in his eyes. It was a small moment, but it planted a seed of hope that maybe, just maybe, James was capable of change. As the baby's due date approaches, James takes a more hands-on role, helping Samantha navigate the final weeks of her pregnancy. However, an unexpected complication during labor tests James's commitment and reveals just how far he's willing to go to prove himself worthy of Samantha's trust. The final weeks of Samantha's pregnancy were a blur of preparation and exhaustion. Her body ached, and even with James's newfound support, she still carried the emotional weight of her doubts. James, on the other hand, was determined to prove himself. He spent every free moment checking in on Samantha, ensuring her needs were met, and even learning about childbirth to prepare for the big day. But life had a way of throwing curveballs. It was late at night when James's phone buzzed on his bedside table. Groggy, he reached for it and saw Amanda's name flashing on the screen. Panic surged through him as he answered. "James, it's Samantha." Amanda's voice was frantic. "She's in labor, but there's a complication. She's at the hospital." James didn't wait for more details. He threw on the nearest clothes and raced out the door, his mind spinning with worry. The drive to the hospital felt interminable, his thoughts oscillating between fear and determination. He couldn't bear the thought of losing Samantha or the baby, especially now that he was finally trying to make things right. When James arrived at the hospital, he found Amanda pacing in the waiting room. Her face was pale, and she looked as though she had been crying. "What's happening?" James demanded, his voice sharp with urgency. "They said there's a complication with the baby," Amanda explained, her voice trembling. "The doctors are monitoring her, but it doesn't look good." James felt his knees weaken, but he forced himself to stay upright. He couldn't afford to crumble. "I need to see her." Amanda nodded and pointed toward the maternity ward. James rushed down the hallway, his heart pounding in his chest. When he entered Samantha's room, the sight before him was both heartbreaking and humbling. Samantha lay on the hospital bed, her face pale and covered in a sheen of sweat. Her breathing was labored and she looked utterly exhausted. "Samantha," James said softly, stepping closer. She turned her head toward him, her eyes filled with pain and fear. "James," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The baby. Something's wrong." He took her hand in his, gripping it tightly. "I'm here. You're not alone." A doctor entered the room, breaking the tense moment. "We need to perform an emergency C-section," he explained. "The baby's heart rate is dropping and we can't wait." Samantha's eyes widened with fear, and she clung to James's hand. "I'm scared," she admitted. James leaned in, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "You're the strongest person I know, Samantha. You've got this, and I'll be here every step of the way." James wasn't allowed in the operating room, so he found himself back in the waiting area, pacing endlessly. Amanda sat nearby, trying to offer words of comfort, but James barely heard her. His mind was consumed with worry. Minutes felt like hours as he replayed every moment of their journey together, the mistakes he'd made, the pain he'd caused, and the fragile hope of redemption that had begun to grow between them. He silently prayed, promising that if Samantha and the baby made it through this, He would dedicate his life to making amends. Finally, the doors to the operating room swung open, and a nurse approached him. "Mr. Carter," she said, "both mother and baby are stable." Relief washed over James like a tidal wave, and his knees buckled as he sat down. He didn't realize he had been holding his breath until he exhaled shakily. "Can I see them?" he asked. The nurse nodded. "Samantha is still recovering, but you can see your son." James followed the nurse to the neonatal unit, where rows of tiny cribs held newborns wrapped in blankets. The nurse led him to one particular crib, where a tiny baby lay sleeping. The baby was small but perfect, with a tuft of dark hair and delicate features. "This is your son," the nurse said with a smile. James felt an overwhelming surge of emotion as he gazed down at the baby. Tears streamed down his face as he gently reached out, his finger brushing against the baby's tiny hand. The baby's fingers instinctively curled around his, and in that moment James felt a connection stronger than anything he had ever known. "Hi, little guy," James whispered, his voice trembling. "I'm your dad. I promise I'm going to be the best dad I can be." He stayed there for what felt like hours, simply watching his son and marveling at the miracle of his life. For the first time in years, James felt a sense of purpose that went beyond his career or his ego. This child represented a second chance, not just at fatherhood, but at being a better man. Later that day, James was allowed to visit Samantha in her recovery room. She looked exhausted, but peaceful, her eyes lighting up when she saw James holding their son. "He's beautiful," James said as he approached her bed. "Just like his mom." Samantha managed a weak smile. "How are you holding up?" "I should be asking you that," James replied, setting the baby in her arms. "You're incredible, Samantha. Watching you go through this has shown me how strong you are. I don't deserve to be a part of your life after everything I've done, but I'm so grateful you let me be here." Samantha looked down at their son, her expression softening. "I didn't do it for you, James. I did it for him. He deserves to have a father." James nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I know, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving to you both that I can be the father and the man you deserve." The days that followed were filled with small but significant milestones. James stayed by Samantha's side, helping with feedings, changing diapers, and supporting her through the recovery process. He took time off work to focus solely on his new family, a decision that surprised even himself. Samantha, though still cautious, began to see glimpses of the man she had fallen in love with years ago. James's actions spoke louder than his words, and while the wounds of their past couldn't be erased overnight, a foundation of trust slowly began to rebuild. As James and Samantha navigate the challenges of co-parenting, their relationship begins to evolve in unexpected ways. But when an unexpected visitor from James's past resurfaces, old wounds threaten to unravel the fragile progress they've made. Will James prove his commitment, or will his past mistakes come back to haunt him? The weeks following the birth of their son, whom Samantha named Theodore, were a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments. James threw himself wholeheartedly into his role as a father. Every moment spent with Theodore, whether rocking him to sleep or watching his tiny features form expressions, felt like a second chance at life. Samantha, while still guarded, couldn't help but notice James's dedication. He was no longer the arrogant man who had once prioritized his career and image over his family. He was evolving. However, the past has a way of creeping back when you least expect it. One crisp autumn afternoon, James was at Samantha's apartment, helping assemble a crib he had insisted on buying. Theodore was napping in a bassinet nearby, and Samantha was sorting through baby clothes. The quiet rhythm of their new normal was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Samantha froze, her eyes narrowing. "Were you expecting someone?" "No," James said, standing up. "I'll check." He opened the door to find Claire standing there, impeccably dressed and visibly furious. Her sudden appearance felt like a slap to the face, dragging James back to a part of his life he was trying to leave behind. "Claire," James said, his voice laced with disbelief. "Don't act surprised," Claire snapped, brushing past him into the apartment. Her eyes swept over the modest living room, lingering on Samantha, who was holding a tiny onesie. "Is this what you left me for?" Claire demanded, her voice dripping with disdain. "A rundown apartment and her?" Samantha stiffened but said nothing, her protective instincts kicking in as she glanced at Theodore. "This isn't the time or place," James said firmly, stepping between Claire and Samantha. We can talk outside. No, Claire said, crossing her arms. I want to know why you vanished from my life without an explanation. Why you threw away everything we had. For this? Her words cut deep, not because they were entirely untrue, but because James knew she deserved better than how he had treated her. Still, he couldn't let her belittle Samantha or their child. Claire, I'm sorry for how I handled things, James began, his tone steady. But this isn't about you or me anymore. It's about Theodore. Claire blinked, her expression shifting from anger to confusion. Theodore? My son, James said, glancing toward the bassinet. And Samantha's. The weight of James's words hit Claire like a tidal wave. She looked between James and Samantha, the pieces falling into place. You have a child? She said, her voice quieter now, almost disbelieving. Yes, James said, his voice firm. And I'm committed to being there for him no matter what. Claire's eyes filled with a mixture of hurt and anger. You could have told me, she said, her voice cracking. I wouldn't have stopped you from being a father, but you just disappeared, like I meant nothing. Samantha, unable to remain silent any longer, stepped forward. Claire, I understand you're hurt, she said, her tone calm but resolute. But this isn't the time to hash out your grievances. This is my home, and my son is sleeping. Please respect that. Claire opened her mouth to argue but closed it again, perhaps realizing the truth in Samantha's words. She turned back to James, her eyes hardening. You've made your choice. I hope it's worth it. With that, Claire stormed out, leaving a tense silence in her wake. James closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling deeply. I'm sorry, he said, looking at Samantha. I didn't expect her to show up like that. Samantha shook her head, her expression unreadable. You should have told her sooner, James. She didn't deserve to find out this way. I know, James admitted. I handled things poorly, as usual, but I'll deal with the fallout. I just hope this doesn't complicate things for you and Theodore. Samantha didn't respond immediately. Instead, she sat down and picked up one of Theodore's tiny socks, turning it over in her hands. James, if you want to be in our lives, you need to start tying up the loose ends in yours. I won't let anyone else's drama spill into my son's life. Her words were a wake-up call for James. He realized that being a father and a partner wasn't just about showing up. It was about taking responsibility for everything, past and present. The next day, James made a difficult decision. He called Claire and arranged to meet her in a neutral public place to have an honest conversation. When they met, Claire's demeanor was cold but controlled. I didn't handle things well, James admitted, sitting across from her at the cafe. I should have been upfront with you about everything. You deserved honesty and I didn't give you that. Claire sipped her coffee, her expression softening slightly. Why did you do it, James? Why didn't you just tell me the truth? James hesitated, but decided to lay it all out. Because I was scared. Scared of facing what I'd done to Samantha. Scared of admitting that I wasn't the man I pretended to be. And when I found out about the baby, it forced me to confront everything I'd been avoiding. Claire studied him for a long moment before nodding. I appreciate the apology, she said, but I need time to process all of this. I thought we had a future together. I'm sorry for hurting you, James said sincerely. You're an incredible person, Claire, and you deserve someone who can give you the love and honesty I couldn't. They parted on civil terms, and though the conversation didn't erase the hurt James had caused, it allowed both of them to move forward. With Claire no longer a looming shadow over his life, James felt a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced in years. He threw himself even more into his role as a father, attending parenting classes and learning everything he could about newborn care. Samantha, though still cautious, began to see the consistency in his actions. One evening, as they sat in the living room while Theodore slept, Samantha broke the silence. You've changed, James, she said quietly. James looked at her, his expression serious. I'm trying, Samantha. Not just for Theodore, but for myself. I don't want to be the man I used to be. Samantha nodded, her gaze softening. It's not easy to forgive the past, but I'm starting to believe that you're sincere. Just don't give me a reason to doubt you. I won't, James promised. As James and Samantha continue to rebuild their relationship, an unexpected opportunity forces them to confront their feelings for one another. Can they truly move beyond the pain of their past, or will their lingering fears and insecurities hold them back? Stay tuned for a heartwarming journey of redemption, love, and the strength of second chances. James Carter had spent the better part of his life building empires, his company, his wealth, his reputation, but rebuilding trust with Samantha proved to be the most complex challenge he'd ever faced. Unlike corporate deals or mergers, trust wasn't something you could negotiate. It had to be earned, one small step at a time. Theodore became James's anchor, a reason to show up every day with purpose. He started arriving at Samantha's apartment early in the morning, often with breakfast in hand. Samantha, though still hesitant, began to let her guard down in small increments. She couldn't ignore how attentive James was, not only to Theodore but also to her well-being. "You don't have to bring breakfast every day," Samantha said one morning as she cradled Theodore in her arms. "I'm capable of managing." "I know you are," James replied, setting a bag of croissants and coffee on the counter. "But it's not about what you can do. It's about what I want to do. For both of you." His sincerity caught her off guard, but she didn't press further. She simply nodded and took the coffee he offered. It was a quiet moment, but it was one of many that began to soften the walls she'd built around her heart. James was determined to be involved in every aspect of Theodore's life. Diaper changes, late-night feedings, and lullabies were no longer foreign concepts to him. He read parenting books and watched tutorial videos, much to Samantha's amusement. "You're really serious about this, aren't you?" she asked one evening as she watched him fumble with a baby carrier. "Completely," James said, grinning as he finally managed to secure the straps. "But this thing is more complicated than a boardroom presentation." Samantha laughed, a genuine, heartfelt laugh that surprised even her. It was the first time in years that she'd felt a glimmer of the connection they once shared. James noticed it too, and felt a flicker of hope. Despite their progress, old wounds sometimes resurfaced. One evening, while organizing Theodore's tiny clothes, Samantha came across an old photo tucked into the back of a drawer. It was a picture of her and James from their honeymoon, both of them glowing with happiness and naivety. She stared at it for a long moment before James walked in. "What's that?" he asked, noticing the photo in her hand. "Nothing," Samantha said quickly, shoving it back into the drawer. James frowned. "Samantha, we can't move forward if we keep avoiding the past. Talk to me." Her eyes filled with unshed tears. "Do you know how hard it is to look at that and remember who we used to be? Do you even realize how much you hurt me?" James's heart sank. "I do," he said softly. "Every single day I think about the pain I caused you, and I hate myself for it. But I'm trying, Samantha. I'm trying to be better. For you and Theodore." She wiped her eyes and nodded, though the pain was still evident. "I know, but it's going to take time." 1 week later, James surprised Samantha with something that caught her completely off guard. While she was at work, he hired a small team to repaint Theodore's room and install shelves for the baby's toys and books. When Samantha came home and saw the transformation, she was speechless. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I know," James replied, holding Theodore in his arms. "But I wanted to. You've done so much on your own, and I just wanted to help." Samantha looked around the room, her eyes lingering on the soft blue walls and the neatly organized shelves. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope that maybe James really had changed. As James became more involved in Samantha and Theodore's lives, word inevitably spread. The media caught wind of his visits to Samantha's apartment and began speculating about their relationship. Tabloid headlines ranged from "CEO rekindles romance with ex-wife" to "Love triangle drama, James Carter's double life." Samantha was furious when she saw the headlines. "This is exactly why I didn't want you back in my life," she said, shoving a magazine into James's hands. "I don't want Theodore growing up in the middle of a media circus." James sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry, Samantha. I didn't think this would happen." "That's the problem, James," she snapped. "You never think about how your actions affect others." James didn't argue. Instead, he reached out to his PR team and released a statement, setting the record straight. He publicly acknowledged Theodore as his son and asked for privacy for his family. It was a bold move, but it showed Samantha that he was willing to stand by her and Theodore, no matter the backlash. To escape the media frenzy, James suggested a day trip to a quiet countryside park. Samantha hesitated at first, but eventually agreed. It was the first time the three of them spent an entire day together outside the apartment. They strolled through the park, Theodore bundled up in a baby carrier on James's chest. Samantha couldn't help but smile at the sight of James cooing at their son, completely oblivious to the stares of passers-by. As they sat on a picnic blanket, James turned to Samantha. "Thank you for letting me be a part of this," he said earnestly. "It means more to me than I can put into words." Samantha looked at him, her heart conflicted. "Don't thank me yet, James. We still have a long way to go." That evening, as they returned to the apartment, Samantha found herself reflecting on the day. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild something meaningful, not as the people they once were, but as the people they were becoming. James, too, felt a shift. He realized that love wasn't about grand gestures or sweeping declarations. It was about showing up every day, putting in the effort, and being there for the people who mattered most. As James and Samantha navigate their evolving relationship, an unexpected offer from James threatens to upend their fragile balance. Will Samantha be ready to take a leap of faith, or will her lingering fears hold her back? Stay tuned for a story of redemption, resilience, and the power of second chances. As the days turned into weeks, James and Samantha's tentative bond grew stronger, but it remained fragile. They communicated more openly, albeit cautiously, and found a rhythm in co-parenting Theodore. Yet Samantha couldn't shake her reservations. While James's efforts seemed genuine, the scars of his past betrayals still haunted her. One evening, James arrived at Samantha's apartment with an unusual intensity in his eyes. Theodore had just fallen asleep, and Samantha was tidying up the small living room when James spoke. "Samantha, can we talk for a minute?" he asked, his voice serious yet hesitant. Samantha raised an eyebrow. "What's on your mind?" James took a deep breath. "I want to do more for you and Theodore. I've been thinking a lot about your living situation, your job, everything you've had to endure. It's not enough for me to just be present. I want to help rebuild what I tore apart." Samantha froze, unsure where this was heading. "What exactly are you suggesting, James?" "I want you and Theodore to move into a better home," he said, his words measured. "A place where you don't have to worry about bills or safety. And I don't mean me taking control. I want it to be yours. A fresh start for both of you." The offer stunned Samantha. She stared at James, trying to process his words. Her first instinct was to reject the idea outright. "James, do you even hear yourself?" she said, crossing her arms. "You think throwing money at the problem will fix everything? It doesn't work that way." "It's not about the money," James said earnestly. "It's about giving you and Theodore the stability you deserve. I know I can't undo the past, but I can try to make the future better." Samantha shook her head. "You don't get it, do you? I've spent years clawing my way back from the mess you left me in. Accepting this feels like admitting defeat, like I can't stand on my own." James stepped closer, his voice softer. "This isn't about your strength, Samantha. I know how strong you are. This is about giving Theodore the best possible life. Don't let pride get in the way of that." The conversation quickly escalated into a heated argument. Samantha's voice trembled with anger and frustration as she laid bare her fears. "You think this is about pride?" she snapped. "It's about trust, James. I trusted you once, and you shattered me. How do I know you won't do it again? How do I know this isn't just another way for you to control me?" James flinched at her words but didn't back down. "I know I broke your trust, and I hate myself for it. But this isn't about control. It's about taking responsibility. For Theodore, for you, for the damage I caused. You don't have to trust me yet, but at least consider what's best for our son." Their argument lingered in the air like a storm cloud. Finally, Samantha sighed and turned away. "I need time to think about this," she said quietly. "Don't expect an answer tonight." That night, Samantha confided in Amanda, her closest friend and confidant. Over cups of tea in Samantha's modest kitchen, they dissected James's offer. "Do you think he's sincere?" Amanda asked, her expression thoughtful. "I don't know," Samantha admitted. "He seems different, but it's hard to forget what he put me through, and I don't want to depend on him again." Amanda nodded. "I get it, but maybe this isn't about dependence. Maybe it's about giving Theodore a better life. If James is serious about changing, shouldn't he have the chance to prove it?" Samantha hesitated. Deep down, she knew Amanda was right, but letting James back into her life, even in this small way, felt like a risk she wasn't sure she could take. Meanwhile, James was grappling with his own doubts. He sought advice from Liam, his trusted lawyer and friend, during a late-night meeting at his penthouse. "You're walking a fine line here," Liam warned. "Samantha has every reason to be cautious. You can't rush her decision no matter how good your intentions are." "I know," James said, pacing the room. "But I can't just sit back and do nothing. Theodore deserves better, and so does she." Liam nodded. "Then give her space. Keep showing up, but don't push. Let her see that you're in this for the long haul." James took Liam's advice to heart. Over the next week, he continued to support Samantha and Theodore without bringing up the offer again. He attended doctor's appointments, helped with household errands, and even took over some of Samantha's night shifts to give her a break. Slowly but surely, his actions began to speak louder than his words. One evening, as Samantha rocked Theodore to sleep, she found herself reflecting on James's recent behavior. He had been patient, consistent, and selfless, qualities she hadn't associated with him in years. For the first time, she allowed herself to wonder if he truly had changed. The next morning, Samantha made her decision. She called James and asked him to meet her at a nearby park. When he arrived, she didn't waste time with small talk. "I've thought about your offer," she began, her tone guarded, "and I'm willing to accept, but on my terms." James nodded, his relief evident. "Of course, whatever you need." Samantha outlined her conditions. The new home would be in her name, and she would have full control over its management. James could contribute financially but would have no say in how she chose to live her life. Additionally, their co-parenting arrangement would remain unchanged, with Theodore's well-being as the top priority. James agreed without hesitation. "This is your fresh start, Samantha. I just want to be part of it." Within weeks, Samantha and Theodore moved into a cozy but spacious home in a quiet neighborhood. James ensured it was fully furnished and ready for them, but he respected Samantha's independence every step of the way. Watching her settle into the new space, James felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in years. For Samantha, the transition was bittersweet. She was grateful for the stability the new home provided, but she remained wary of James's intentions. Still, she couldn't deny that his efforts were genuine, and she began to see glimpses of the man she had once fallen in love with. As James and Samantha navigated this new chapter, their relationship slowly began to evolve. The wounds of the past didn't disappear overnight, but they started to heal, one small act of kindness at a time. For James, the journey wasn't just about redemption. It was about becoming the man Samantha and Theodore deserved. And for Samantha, it was about learning to trust again, not just in James, but in herself. Together they discovered that second chances, while rare, could be worth fighting for. The weeks following Samantha and Theodore's move into their new home marked a turning point in their lives. Samantha, who had spent years shielding herself from the pain of her past, began to tentatively lower her guard. James, in turn, worked tirelessly to demonstrate that his transformation was more than just words. Their relationship remained fragile, but for the first time in years it was rooted in mutual respect and a shared goal, creating a better future for their son. James had always been a man of action, and he approached his renewed relationship with Samantha with the same determination that had made him a successful CEO. He made a point of being present without overstepping boundaries. Each day, he found small ways to support her, whether it was dropping off groceries, babysitting Theodore while she ran errands, or simply being available when she needed a listening ear. But James's dedication wasn't limited to Samantha and Theodore. He also began to reflect on his own life, seeking to address the flaws that had driven them apart in the first place. Therapy sessions became a regular part of his routine, as did volunteer work at local shelters and community centers. For James, these acts of service were not just about redemption. They were about rediscovering his own humanity. For Samantha, the adjustment to her new life was both liberating and challenging. The spacious home provided a sense of security she hadn't felt in years, but it also came with an emotional weight. Each room, carefully furnished by James, was a reminder of the man who had once caused her so much pain, and who was now trying to make amends. Her days were busy but fulfilling. She continued to work part-time at the restaurant, though she was now able to reduce her hours and spend more time with Theodore. In her free time, she began exploring her old passions, writing, painting, and reconnecting with friends she had lost touch with during the tumultuous years of her marriage. Despite her progress, Samantha struggled with trust. She couldn't shake the fear that James's newfound kindness was temporary. that he would eventually revert to the selfish, unfaithful man she had divorced. It was a fear she voiced to Amanda during one of their late-night chats. "You think he's really changed?" Samantha asked, nursing a cup of tea as Theodore slept soundly in the next room. Amanda considered the question carefully. "He seems different, Sam, but only time will tell. People don't change overnight, and trust isn't something you can force." Samantha nodded, her expression pensive. "I just don't want to make the same mistake twice. Theodore deserves stability, not a father who's here one moment and gone the next." "Then take it slow," Amanda advised. "Let his actions speak for themselves. If he's serious about being in your life, he'll prove it over time." As the months passed, Theodore became a central figure in James and Samantha's journey toward reconciliation. The baby's infectious laughter, curious nature, and growing personality brought joy to their lives and served as a reminder of what truly mattered. For James, fatherhood was a revelation. He cherished every milestone, the first time Theodore rolled over, his first hesitant steps, and the moments of wonder that lit up his little face. James documented each one, filling albums with photos and videos that he hoped Theodore would one day treasure. Samantha watched these moments with a mixture of gratitude and trepidation. She couldn't deny the bond forming between James and their son, but she also couldn't ignore the lingering doubt in her heart. Could James truly be the father Theodore needed? And if he could, did that mean there was hope for their family as a whole? One day, while walking Theodore in the park, James noticed a small community center hosting a charity event. Families gathered around booths selling homemade crafts, while children played games and painted murals on large canvases. James was struck by the sense of camaraderie and decided to join in. Samantha, initially skeptical of James's involvement, was surprised when he invited her and Theodore to the next event. Hesitant but curious, she agreed. Together, they spent the afternoon helping to organize donations and participating in activities with other families. For Samantha, the experience was eye-opening. Seeing James interact with the community, especially with children from underprivileged backgrounds, gave her a glimpse of the man he was becoming. It was a side of him she hadn't seen before, and it left her cautiously hopeful. Despite the progress they had made, the shadow of their past continued to loom over them. One evening, as they sat on the porch of Samantha's new home, James broached a topic they had both avoided. "Samantha," he began, his voice hesitant, "I know I've apologized for what I did to you, but I don't think I've ever really asked. How did you manage after I left? I can't stop thinking about what you must have gone through." Samantha stared at him, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in a voice heavy with emotion, she began to recount the years following their divorce. "It wasn't easy," she admitted. "I was angry, heartbroken, and scared. I had nothing, no job, no savings, and no idea how I was going to raise a child on my own. There were nights when I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I'd made the right decision." James listened intently, his heart breaking with each word. "I'm so sorry, Samantha. I should have been there for you." "I don't need your pity," she said, her tone sharp but not unkind. "What I need is for you to understand that I survived because I had no other choice, and I won't let anyone, not even you, take that independence away from me." James nodded, his respect for Samantha growing with each passing moment. "I understand," he said quietly, "and I promise I'll never undermine your independence again. I just want to be someone you and Theodore can rely on." Samantha softened, her gaze meeting his. "Then keep doing what you're doing, James. Show me that you're in this for the long haul, not just for Theodore, but for yourself." James nodded, a sense of determination washing over him. "I will, Samantha. I promise." In the weeks that followed, James and Samantha continued to navigate their new reality. Their relationship remained far from perfect, but it was evolving, slowly, steadily, and on their own terms. For Samantha, each day brought a new sense of clarity. She began to see James not as the man who had hurt her, but as the man he was striving to become. And for James, each interaction with Samantha and Theodore reinforced his commitment to the family he had once taken for granted. Together, they began to lay the foundation for a future that, while uncertain, was filled with possibility. And as they stood side by side, watching Theodore take his first steps in the backyard, they couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope for the journey ahead. James stood in Samantha's modest hospital room, the sterile scent of antiseptic mingling with the warmth of new life. In his arms, he held his newborn son for the first time. The baby's tiny fingers curled around his thumb, a grip so small yet so powerful it shattered every remaining shard of James's emotional armor. He felt tears streaming down his face, unbidden and unstoppable. The man who once prided himself on his unshakable composure was undone by the innocence of this child, a child he almost never knew existed. Samantha, propped up in the hospital bed, looked on with a mixture of exhaustion and guarded hope. She had fought so hard, enduring months of uncertainty and pain, yet here they were, united by a moment she never thought possible. James's transformation was undeniable, but was it permanent? Could she truly trust the man who had once destroyed her? "I'm sorry," James whispered, his voice trembling as he gazed at the baby. "For everything. For not being there when you needed me most. For not realizing what I had until it was almost too late. I promise to be the father he deserves, and the man you deserve, Samantha." Samantha's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away. "Words are easy, James. I've heard promises before. What matters is what you do from here." He nodded, understanding the depth of the challenge ahead. "I know, and I'll prove it. Not for me, but for him. For us." The following weeks were a whirlwind of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and late-night feedings. James threw himself into fatherhood with the same dedication he once reserved for his business empire. He attended every doctor's appointment, learned how to swaddle a baby, and even mastered the art of soothing cries with a gentle lullaby. But it wasn't just about the baby. James knew that to truly earn Samantha's trust, he had to rebuild their relationship from the ground up. He started small, respecting her boundaries and showing up consistently, not with grand gestures but with quiet reliability. He arranged for her apartment to be repaired, ensuring it was safe and comfortable for her and the baby. He hired a part-time nanny, giving Samantha the rest she desperately needed while allowing her to maintain her independence. One crisp autumn afternoon, James invited Samantha to visit his office. It wasn't for business. It was to show her a project he had been working on for weeks. As they entered the boardroom, Samantha was greeted by a group of smiling faces, her former colleagues from the marketing agency where she once thrived. "What is this?" she asked, her voice tinged with confusion and curiosity. James stepped forward, a hint of nervousness in his otherwise confident demeanor. "I've been thinking about everything you gave up for me. For us. You left a career you loved because I convinced you it was the right thing to do. But it wasn't fair, and it wasn't right. So I reached out to some people who know your talent and believe in you as much as I do." One of the former colleagues stepped forward, extending a hand. "Samantha, we've missed your brilliance, and we'd like to offer you a position on your terms. Work from home, part-time, or however you choose. We just want you back." Tears welled up in Samantha's eyes as she looked at James, who smiled hesitantly. "You deserve to have your dreams back, Samantha. This is just the beginning." Months passed and the once fractured relationship began to heal. James continued to prove his commitment, not just as a father, but as a partner. He attended therapy, both individually and with Samantha, confronting the demons that had once sabotaged their marriage. Slowly but surely, Samantha's walls began to come down. On a snowy winter evening, as the city sparkled with holiday lights, James invited Samantha and their son, Theo, to a quiet dinner at a small, family-owned restaurant. It was far from the opulent venues he once preferred, but it was intimate and meaningful, just like their journey. After dinner, as Samantha bundled Theo in his tiny coat, James reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He knelt before her, the snow falling softly around them. "Samantha," he began, his voice steady yet emotional, "I know I've hurt you more than words can ever repair, but you've given me something I never thought I'd have again. Hope. Hope for a better future, for a family built on love and trust. I don't deserve a second chance, but I'm asking for one. Will you marry me? Not because I want to go back to what we had, but because I want to build something new, something stronger with you." Samantha stared at him, her breath visible in the cold air. She glanced at Theo, who gurgled happily in her arms, and then back at James. Her heart was torn between the pain of the past and the promise of the future. "Yes," she finally said, her voice breaking with emotion, "but only if you promise we'll never stop fighting for us. For him." James stood, slipping the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a gentle embrace. I promise. Always. A year later, on a sunlit spring day, James and Samantha stood before a small gathering of family and close friends, renewing their vows. This time there were no grand expectations or illusions, just an honest commitment to love, respect, and grow together. Theo, now toddling around with endless energy, served as their ring-bearer, bringing laughter and tears to the ceremony. As they exchanged vows, James and Samantha felt the weight of their journey, the pain, the growth, and the redemption that brought them to this moment. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and it was proof that even the deepest wounds could heal with time, effort, and love. Over the years, James and Samantha built a life rooted in the lessons they had learned. They prioritized family dinners over business deals, laughter over luxury, and kindness over ambition. Their home was filled with warmth and joy, a stark contrast to the cold opulence James once valued. James used his wealth and influence to support causes close to Samantha's heart, creating scholarships for single mothers and funding shelters for women and children in need. Together, they became a beacon of hope, showing that transformation was possible, even for those who seemed irredeemable. As they watched Theo grow into a compassionate and confident young man, James and Samantha knew their greatest success wasn't in wealth or achievements. It was in the family they had fought to rebuild.
Thank you for watching this touching story here on the True Crime Studio. This tale reminds us of the power of forgiveness, love, and second chances, showing that it's never too late to make things right. If this story moved you, please like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the True Crime Studio for more incredible stories. Wishing you love, happiness, and all the best. See you in the next video.